Well, for live, I hope everybody can hear me. It's Rob Fraser from Molecular U. I'm the President and Chief Scientific Officer. And this is the second in our series of trends in precision longevity as we look forward to 2026. And what we're going to discuss today is what every concierge clinic needs to know. And I'm super excited today because I've got an amazing panel. We've got Erica Marizio, founder and head of ETA Healthspan. And we've got Adam Kaufman, a healthcare executive and digital health advisor, and Hillary Lynn, who's an MD, Chief Executive Officer, co-founder of CareCore. So what I'd like to begin with is really allow our panelists to introduce themselves, give a bit of background, and what are the things that have motivated them to enter into this exciting world of healthy longevity or extended health span. So let's begin with you, Erica.
Sure. Hi, my name is Erica, and I actually started in this space about 15 years ago as both a nutritionist and, believe it or not, an IFBB pro bodybuilder. I found just in my like mid 30s, I just wasn't feeling great and stuck in a rut and taking care of everyone else except for myself. So I dove really deep into my health. And so I'm a lifelong, really bio optimization enthusiast. And so I created Elite Healthspan in a way for our members to become the CEO of their own health through education, innovation, and expertise. It's a community-based platform, and it's hard launching in Q1, and I'm really excited. Thanks, and I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, love that title. I mean, it really is about, it gives value to your health, and I think that's one of the things that we just don't do enough of in our world today.
Right, right.
Um,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Adam, would you please introduce yourself?
Course. So first, it's a pleasure to be here, Erica, Hillary, Rob. Just excited to be in this conversation with you. In some ways, my journey was obvious. My parents are both physicians. My mom is an endocrinologist. Wrote a book 30 years ago now called Diabesity, which was one of the first times that we had thought about obesity as an epidemic and sort of the concentric circles of individuals, their communities, and government in impacting lifestyle. But of course, since my parents were doctors, I wanted to have nothing to do with healthcare at first. So I'm an engineer by training and a health economist, but found my way back first through the technology side and have spent my career first in well-being, behavior change. We built a company that was one of the first to do the diabetes prevention program. I ran the healthcare business at Weight Watchers for some time and saw the power of coaching and a lot of the modalities we have in longevity, but was frustrated how this sort of lived outside of healthcare and have spent the last now 3 years of my career working kind of deeply in healthcare. I spent 2 years with Mayo Clinic. I'm now working with Baylor Scott and White, among other companies that I work with, and seeing the ability to bring this kind of proactive care, whether it's on the diagnostic side or the interventional side, into what we do in primary care and specialty care. And most recently, I was an entrepreneur in residence at Baylor Scott and White, and we looked very deeply at the whole space of longevity, what we might do as a health system, and so some of that we can share. So maybe inevitable that I was here, but also a circuitous route from technology and behavior change into sort of this more comprehensive health optimization space.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it'll be great to get your insight, particularly on how we can get people more participant in their health. So really appreciate you joining us this morning, Adam. Hillary, would you please introduce yourself and give some background?
Thank you so much. So, I come from a classic background of academic medicine. Really, I spent the beginning of my career at Stanford. I'm internal medicine board certified, and it was actually an interesting journey. So, I too come from a family of doctors, and I went into medicine fully intending to become a full-time clinician, and my path has taken me elsewhere. And to briefly speak about the inspirations why is because, as many of us here know, the healthcare system is more of a sick care system.
Mhm.
And I saw that from nearly day one,
Yeah.
it feels like, in medical school. And I actually moved further. I now live in New York. I came here originally to be an oncologist. I was at Columbia briefly. And that actually really opened my eyes towards the value of precision medicine, which is a lot of what I think about and do as well. Because precision medicine was really born in cancer care, and it's now being more and more relevant for longevity, concierge medicine, primary care as well, which we're going to talk a lot about. So that was my inspirations there. And about 8 years ago, I embarked on a career more as a health tech entrepreneur while maintaining a clinical role on the side. And I've been doing that ever since. Most significantly, my past VC-backed company with Curio was in the psychedelic assisted mental health space. And now I'm working on the platform CareCore, and we're about to launch. So it's an exciting time. But the whole mission of it is how can we help scale up personalized longevity care? So I won't, go deeply into that, but that is the
Yeah,
mission. Yeah.
we'll get into that shortly, I'm sure. So looking forward to hearing a lot more on that. And precision health. It was funny. I remember it was Dr. Lee Hood who said there's no precision in healthcare. You've got to make it personal, but it's which makes it precision, I guess. So anyway, we'll dive into a little bit more of this as we go forward. I wanted to begin with some topics just to open things up. We're getting a lot of exciting technologies that are emergent, and maybe you could share with us some of the more successful concierge like longevity practices that you've come across in 2025, or that you've actually done. And what have you learned from either implementing themselves or watching others implement them, and some of the challenges that concierge clinicians might face? Erica, why don't we kick it off with you?
Well, I think what's happening is with the lack of board certification and unregulatory part of it, it's very confusing even to a lot of doctors. So I think it's important that they really focus on the science behind the different modalities, whether they're working with stem cells, exosomes, peptides, that sort of thing. But really digging deep into your own research and science, while also attending extremely credible CE classes to really educate yourself about it. I remember when I was with a biotech company, I was educating so many people about exosomes. They had no idea what they were. And I had to explain that they're almost like a soup. They're the messenger, but they also have the growth factors and the cytokines and everything. So it's not just, that it's a message, but it's like a soup of a bunch of different ingredients. So education is huge in being part of that kind of longevity health spanning space.
Yeah, so you see that as something that's lacking this board certification in this space. That's really, really fascinating. I came across some groups that are keen on getting that in place, actually. So that might be a good follow-up discussion.
Mhm.
Adam, you get to you interact with a lot of different groups as you mentioned, so you must come across some pretty exciting practices and various technologies that are emergent. Do you mind sharing some of those with us?
Yeah, of course. So I think at the top level, what I think is most exciting, and we, probably will point to 2025 as sort of the pivot year, but it obviously started earlier and it still has some spaces. Um, there's a lot that goes into providing longevity care. We are seeing some concierge style practices that have raised enough capital, have a big enough footprint to kind of put all of that into one location. But even there's always something they don't do. And so what's been really exciting, particularly for I think the smaller practices, is the
Mm.
growth of really credible solution providers who are doing, and I hate to use this word because it's somewhat pejorative, but the point solution so that you can in your practice, you don't have to necessarily have the MRI in your practice, but there are credible solutions to go do a full body MRI. There are plenty of credible lab solutions, interventional solutions, so you can quarterback that for your patients. You can sometimes even bring that data in if you're winning the relationship, but at least you don't have to like then say I don't know where to go or how to do it, and then now there is tech that's even helping you pick among those. So I think this ability to coordinate a much more comprehensive care plan with credible partners is relatively new in this space, and I think enables concierge clinicians to offer a much broader um, service without sort of either having to bring it all in their house and bear the
Mm.
capital costs, or sort of say, I don't know where to go. So I think that's, to me, is one of the biggest things, particularly for those smaller practices.
Yeah, so being that nexus really where all that those tools can come together, um, and delivering it to the patient at the point of care.
And just
Yeah,
to
great
finish
point.
that real quick, because I know Hillary has a lot of insights, I also think a lot of these then beg interpretation, contextualization, and even some prioritization, right? If you've just done a calcium score, that might lead you to one thing, but if you do the calcium and a DEXA and your exomes, you may prioritize other things. And so I think there's a real role for these concierge clinicians to help contextualize what it is, to put it in relevance, but also to prioritize among what is probably a series of things that we could all be better in a number of
Yeah.
dimensions.
Yeah, very interesting. Um, Hillary, how about you? Do you mind sharing with us some of the more interesting or exciting things you've seen coming through 2025?
I think, the real wonderful thing that's become a reality for all of us is that there's no one right way to create a longevity business. It's just like
Mm,
there's no one right stack. People always ask you what a longevity stack is. And I'm like, there's really no one right way. It depends on what you want to do and what you want to create and how you want to do it. So there are going to be physician owners of clinics who want to center a business around their person, their personality, their personal brand. And that's one thing. And focusing on a relationship-based business may be the right thing for that. And on the other side is kind of, to use your words, like a service-based business is more commonly seen in like a very scalable platform. And you see the telemedical types of businesses versus the very local types of businesses. And I don't think there's one definition of success. It really just means that we have a lot of options for all of us in this business. So I'm very excited about that.
yeah, so all the tools are becoming available to all the practitioners, and so they can start to pull them in together. Um, Is there any one technology you think that's really going to influence us this year, Hillary? Like something that's, as we go looking forward and what you saw coming down the pipe, is there something that's, we really need to have our eyes wide open about?
Yeah, well, I almost feel like we can't skip the power of AI, but that's what's backing everything else. So let's just
Right.
assume that it's going to create something monumental for all of us. And I know we're in the molecular U talk right now, so I gotta say, like the level of diagnostics, the omics revolution is so incredibly exciting to me. I think it's just a matter of more broad adoption because we're seeing now it's coming to commercial use and we need to see more omics type diagnostics and measurement used more so we understand how it fits into people's lives. I think the 2025 we saw a rightful sort of birth of everyone getting their blood work done, like the routine blood work, the 100 plus biomarkers. And now we're going to see what happens when it's seen as more of a continuous, monthly even, or one
Right.
day I think it's going to be like these wearables that we all wear, that level of omics measurement over time. So it's going to be exciting. And I think we're still in the very earliest days.
Yeah, we're excited too, because getting that holistic view of where an individual is, you can only really do that by measuring things that maybe we don't measure routinely currently. I'm going to go back to you, Erica, with that same question. Like, what sort of technologies are getting you super excited, that you've come across, and they're really going to drive things going forward in 2026?
Sure. I think what is so interesting is getting back to basics, like doing a genetic test to see where your genes really are, and then follow up with then do a comprehensive panel that's personalized to you. Because a lot of these longevity concierge doctors can personalize the panel to exactly what like your genes are and your family history. So I find that to be really interesting. But I think as far as technology goes, again, it's those wearables and being able to track it to your labs and then being able to get that personalized plan with your nutrition and exercise and that sort of thing. Because some people do better as carnivores, some people do better as vegetarians, some people do better as with a Mediterranean diet. Like you don't really know until you do all these different diagnostics. But I really think that getting that genetic test is extremely important. Then followed up by the blood work, then followed up by maybe the full body MRI, the clearly for the heart, like maybe, but like do it one step at a time to get that true personalized care. But again, going to innovation, I mean, what they're doing for cancer care with immunotherapies in different countries like Mexico is phenomenal. What they're doing for dementia, reversing dementia, is phenomenal. And they can't even advertise it, but it's in an expanded access program. But if you have high galactin 3 levels, there is a drug out there that it was actually designed for cancer that does reverse dementia. I've seen it with my own eyes, and it's miraculous.
Wow. No, I'm not aware of that work at all. But just going back to your original idea of like setting the stage, really like, well, what's your genetics telling us what we need to keep an eye on? There's a lot of, I mean, there is the argument that genetics is core to our health, but it also has to be responding to our environment. So making that work with our genetics is key, right? So,
Right. The
yeah,
epigenetics, where if you have a gene that's turned on, how do you turn it off? Or
sure.
how do you
Yeah.
turn on a gene that's off? Like it's like a little puzzle.
It is very puzzling for sure. I used to study transcriptional mechanisms, and there's a lot involved. So we can get into that on that's a two beer conversation.
Yeah.
Um, Sorry, Adam. I mean, you get your hands in everything here. So let's get the lowdown on what you're seeing on the tech side.
Yeah, absolutely agree with both what Hillary and Erica said. I spend a lot of more of my time thinking about how things scale. And I do
Okay.
think 26, 27, a lot of the technologies that we're all talking about have reached, we can use whatever metaphor, are about to cross the chasm, have gotten through the early adopters. And I think what will be challenging, but is also as exciting, is how do those actually make it into more of a mainstream? Do they make it to clinical care? Do they stop somewhere? And so I think it's going to be much more of a year. There's always an innovation. I mean, the life sciences space, as Erica said, is incredible. But I think the tech side is more, okay, how do you take these things that early adopters, quantified selfers, have figured out how to use and bring that into care more broadly? And in that, I think Erica hit on it. I think a lot of the ability to sort of bring that data together to make it cleaner and clearer for the clinician and to the patient, and how do you synthesize it? So, I mean, I'm wearing my Aura ring. I look at it, I don't even understand most of the data that's coming on. That's one data point, right? That hasn't been synced to anything else that's going on. And so how do we actually do that in a way that is consistent? I think there's a number of people working on that integration of those data points. And I think that will be key over the next couple of years.
That you definitely touch on a major challenge because with so many data inputs coming in, how does anybody, and particularly practitioner who doesn't necessarily have background or training in that, make sense of it and then actually
And if you'll
put
allow
it
me a
in?
story, because we've done this for a long time. So I've been around diabetes for 20 plus years, and it was shocking to me. And Eric and Hillary, I'm sure you saw this, and maybe Rob, everyone 20 years ago be like, oh my God, we see your blood sugars changing. We're going to recommend go do this. And that kind of makes sense. Now, if you're running low, it makes a lot of sense. If you're running high. But then the next step was, well, we see you buy a McDonald's, so we're going to ping you and tell you not to go into McDonald's. And like, it seems an obvious thing. What I can tell you is within a week, everyone turned those notifications off.
Oh, for sure.
Right. So like, there's a lot of things that seem obvious that you would do that, like when you systematize and technological or whatever the right word, like people just get annoyed by it. So figuring out how this actually lives in not those who are like at the forefront of them doing this themselves, but in normal care and normal life is a big challenge for all of this, because I think what we'll see is really what is the retention, everything from business model, what's the sustainability of these things. And I think some of that is still open to be judged. And part of it is because we got to design for people in the way they live and not, the bad metaphor of, oh yeah, imagine if I could just tell you not to go eat the Big Mac. I'm like, people know not to eat a Big Mac. That's not the reason. Like, they don't need a reminder. So I think we're still in the early stage of some of this tech.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, why don't you maybe just build on that a little bit and some of your thoughts about how do we move away from app fatigue and do we actually get those? Do you have some thoughts on how to really engage
We
the
have some
individual?
research, so I'm happy to share it. But I know Hillary, she and I talked a lot about this, so she probably knows it more basic. But what we saw when we surveyed folks is they want clarity on what to do now.
Hmm.
And so one of the big things that we think is important, and I'll put this with, a lot of the hats I wear is, and I mentioned this, and Eric, I'd love your point of view thinking broadly about optimization is there's nearly an infinite number of things I can do tomorrow to be healthier. And I don't know which one really matters, and I don't know how to focus on it, and I don't know how to know I got better in that so that I can then move on to the next thing. And part of the challenge is if you think about the biomarker or the pain or whatever it is that is the driver, the underlying set of interventions is often the same, right? There's the same supplements, there may or may not be the same therapeutics, there's the same sleep better, eat more, eat better, move more. So what we want to intervene with them is probably the same, but it's very different if you're trying to cure low back pain or you're worried about the calcium in your heart. And so how do we help people focus, achieve some results so that they have it, and then come back to the next thing? And that's really about their own cycles and adjusting to that in the intervention layer, which is very different from the diagnostic layer up front.
Right. Yeah, you need that feedback loop. They need to know that whether the changes that the individual's making is actually working or not working, so they can make changes to that.
But I
Hey,
think
look,
the bigger point is to prioritize it to a small subset of things that they feel like they can be successful at and then
okay,
pick the next one. As opposed to like you've got 10
do
blood
all of
levels and we need to do all of them. And you're just like, I don't even
it.
know what they mean tomorrow, let alone, so how do you make it achievable? And then because I think there's this race of like, okay, you've got all these scores, let's get you better in 6 months. And most of this is going to play out over years. And while, yes, if we could get you better in 6 months, you'd be better, but not if you then yo-yoed back.
Yeah,
And so it's
exactly.
about the sustainability of this
You
stuff
need
over
that
the long
more
haul
or
to
shorter
really achieve,
turnaround too.
exactly, to
Yeah.
really achieve the longevity outcomes we care about.
Hillary, you've got some thoughts on this. Adam's introduced to us, so why don't you tell us what you're.
Yeah. Well, I have two major thoughts. One is feedback is king. Like people want to know if something they're doing is impacting them right away. So I had two thoughts about this. So I often tell people that patients or, everyone cares about three things roughly in this order. They want to look good, they want to feel good, and then they want to do good for their health. And absolutely, why do people care about looking good so much? Well, for obvious reasons, attractiveness, but also because you could see it right away. Like people are always asking me about hair, skin, and nails, and we know that that doesn't actually impact your lifespan at all, but it's the most immediate feedback you have about your health. And there's studies showing that human and AI algorithms can tell the internal health of a person just by looking. And that's why you have all these facial sort of analysis algorithms coming out for age. Um, so I bring that up only because that leads me to my next point, which is that people really need instantaneous feedback or as fast feedback as possible.
Mm.
I was discussing with another founder that one of the most effective mechanisms for change is actually a CGM. And not because, I mean, metabolic health is so important, but it's really not because of glucose or anything in particular. It's the fact that it gives you an immediate feedback after you eat a food. It's not like weight loss, which to Adam's story's point, like, you go to a McDonald's and whatever, you can ignore that for months and years even before you start to see and feel the effects of that. But if you have something staring at you telling you that you had a glucose spike, then you kind of have to confront this reality. And so I think more frequent, more continuous data feedback loops is going to help every individual understand better what actually, moves the needle literally for them versus what can they safely ignore.
So that's I mean, is that going to create too much information to process for an individual, or how are you imagining that would work?
Yeah, well, there's definitely folks who suffer from the orthorexia, the correction sort of neuroses, and we see that with folks who are trying to overcorrect their sleep scores, for example. They get anxious and then it becomes even worse. So it's hard to get away from that in a certain subset of people. But I actually view that a large portion of the population just habituates. We learn to ignore large sets of data. I think this was the original worry by a lot of more traditional practitioners who were worried by all of these blood panels with like 100 plus biomarkers. It's like, oh, people are going to get so worried by the results. And I'm like,
Mm.
yeah, but if you do it enough times, they're going to be just like a doctor. You start to see that you're always going to have some abnormalities. Things are going to fluctuate up and down, even in the same person, same day. and you'll recognize what is a significant spike or abnormality versus not. So
Right.
actually, it's not taking away data from people, but giving them a real context and perspective of understanding what data actually looks like.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Could
remember there's
I
this.
could I pick up on that? So
Yeah,
Hillary, I
for
agree with
sure.
you, but let's take the CGM. There's a class of CGM, again, more in diabetes, that is a diagnostic, right? You put it on someone for 2 weeks, they don't see it. You sit down with the doctor or the dietitian or the diabetes educator, and they give you a report. And it's sort of, and then you do it 6 months later, right? And part of this is financing, so let's put aside that. I just want to push back that like everybody wants continuous data on everything all the time, and feel free to push back and say yes they do, and this is just they need it. But part of my sense is some of
Well,
this people want in cycles when they're willing to pay attention to it. They want to know, then they want to go away, live their lives, and come back, and that's why getting that periodicity is important. But
Yeah, my thought on that is you're right. Not everyone wants it, but not everyone really wants to be healthy. So
hmm.
I'm just gonna go ahead and say
This-
that there's a very big difference. And I actually think even though we live in this world of longevity health and we talk about it all the time, we think everybody's jumping on board. In reality, it's like 1% really taking this seriously of the population. Maybe
okay.
10% is really starting to adopt it. The mainstream is still really struggling to jump on this particular train. So I don't think yeah, I agree with you. Not everyone wants it, but for people who are aiming for health optimization, living towards well-being, I absolutely think that that's more valuable.
Yeah. I think you've stuck. Oh, did you? Sorry, Erica, do you want to
Yeah, no,
look like
I
you,
was
but I get something you want to add?
uh, one of my clients, one of my personal concierge clients, because I do consultations. They were in a situation where their insurance put them with a group. Okay, so they took him away from his primary care doctor and put them in a group, and his new primary care doctor is a pediatrician.
Mhm.
And it's quite humorous, right? But it's
Yeah.
not. And so we also have this problem where what's insurance doing and how is it impacting the patients? And I then connected him with a functional medicine doctor, and he's like, why haven't I been doing this my whole life? I said, I know, I've been trying to tell you this. And he's like, this is amazing. I actually get to spend like an hour with a doctor and go over my blood work and coordinate everything. And this functional doctor happens to also have been a general surgeon for 35 years and had a surgery. So he understands the whole systems of the body and is actually pushing his cardiologist back, saying, hey, look, you're putting him on the wrong medication. And the cardiologist is saying, you don't know what you're talking about. And the functional doctor is like, yes, I do. And you need to change this immediately because it's going to affect his vision. So, like having someone that's a quarterback that really has your back, but also to Hillary's point, actually wants it. They don't always know that they want it until they have it. And, like another friend of mine who's visiting me, it was last week actually when we were doing our little like talk, was in so much pain. I said, you need to go see this particular doctor. He goes, oh, I'll wait till Monday. I said, no, you need to go today. So after that lunch, we went and saw that doctor, and he was like, I had no idea that I had micro tears in my foot, and that's why my foot was in so much pain, but
Mm.
was able to get that ultrasound right away, able to get the boot on right away. If he had waited till Monday, those tears would have gotten bigger. So, first of all, it's knowing who to go to, right? You don't always know. You might see
No.
someone that's on a Joe Rogan podcast and think, oh, that's the person I need to go to. And I love what Joe Rogan, advocates for with health, but that might not be the right provider for you. You don't always know. So, that's why I created Elite Healthspan, where it's like you can choose different providers that work for you, whether you want to see them in person or virtually, because you need to be able to have a choice and have a human experience.
And I want to go back to something Hillary said, but building off of what you're talking about is this concept. We got a 1% adoption, maybe 10%. How do we make this grow? How do we scale this longevity? Because you read these articles in Deloitte that's saying that if we can start to get in front of disease and start preventing or protecting our health, we save trillions of dollars downstream, and getting out of this sort of sick care first approach to more health care. When you're sick, you get the doctors to look after you. But how do we scale this? How do we move the needle on this? And maybe we'll start with you, Eric, if you've got some thoughts on that, and then I'd love to hear from Adam and Hillary.
Yeah, I do actually. I think, like Hillary said, it's like feel good, look good, do good for your health, right? So I find the big three to be hormones, weight loss, and hair. Like choose one thing out of those three and do it really, really well. Work with a pharmacy to get, pricing in place, get the panels in place for the patients, because most people are going to end up taking the same metabolic panel, but you could tweak it a little bit, right? But get one of those things nailed down, and then you can really scale it. Then you can add on another one. But if you do one really, really well, you can just multiply it and get a subscription based thing going, happening really fast and scale it quickly.
But how do we scale it across the population? Not so much for about an individual, getting deeper
Well,
into it.
that's what I mean. That's what
Oh,
I
so
mean.
you
They
get
can
everybody
scale
going
it
on one
through,
thing. Oh, I
yeah,
see.
with the
Yeah.
right marketing, with digital marketing and that
Right,
sort of
right.
thing. And like these doctors need to get in front of the camera. They really do. They need to get in front
Okay.
of the camera, whether it's getting on the news, a podcast, um, hosting their own master classes, but getting the word out.
The
I
word out.
mean, you have to get the word out. But I mean, that's why like Hims and Hers is just, I mean, it's in the algorithm. I get an ad for them every single day. And you have to advertise to be able to scale. So perfect one thing, do it really, really well so that
Got
you
it.
can just multiply it and take on 100 patients a day if that's what it comes to, and get that digital onboarding seamless. Like I said, whether it's peptides, GLP-1s, 2, 3s, get the compounding pharmacies involved and have a really, really good package in place that looks also really nice, and just scale that.
Got it. Some marketing, make sure you got all of this thing in sort of a turnkey solution
Yes.
from beginning, start, and to delivery. Adam, what are your thoughts on how do we scale longevity, or let's call it health span, because I think
Yeah.
longevity is a tough one to prove out.
Yeah, so I am relatively pessimistic in the short run about scaling it for two reasons. So one, just if we look at the consumer side, uh, earlier this year we ran a pretty decent sized survey. We did consumer research. Just ran a new survey. We'll be releasing the results in January of kind of consumer preferences, and roughly this is kind of consistent. About 25% of people are more or less satisfied with their healthcare and
Hmm.
or are focused on treating things they already have. So that's the population that's going to take a long time to get kind of more proactive. There's maybe about 25% who are, 20, 25, just kind of rounding numbers, who are like the go-getter, like I want my health, I'm a health optimizer. They're motivated by different things. And then there's this sort of 50% in the middle that some want prevention, some want what we would call Healthspan, some want performance. Those are obviously overlapping, but they want guidance. They're not really going to kind of go do it yourself. So first, most of what we've built in longevity, whether you call it Healthspan, has been for that 25%, and we still have room to grow there. There are some segments outside of that, GLP-1s being a good one. Weight obviously is both health and appearance, so that's an easy one, and it's backed by Big Pharma, which has a big budget, to Erica's point. But I think there's just, the average consumer is not screaming for this, right? And is not looking for it, and it's not showing up in their feed. So I don't think we get. If you look at the healthcare delivery side, my take is healthcare delivery is far from doing anything like this. You've got like three big problems. If you're a big system that's doing well, you're full. Right. So you have no ability, even if you're interested, to do MRIs on people who it's not indicated for in the current insurance protocol. Right. So if you think about a lot of this is taking protocols that are safe, but bringing them to more people, you're not going to put CGMs on folks, whether you get paid or not. Like you're just full. You don't have capacity. And then there's a whole part of health care that is falling apart, particularly the rural piece, the underfunded, the Medicaid-based hospitals. And so they don't have any capacity to do any of this either. So I'm not bullish on this scaling beyond this segment. I think what we need to do is show that it works, show that it is not a selection bias of we buy relatively rich, relatively engaged people already. And so what you're just showing is when you engage in your health, you do better. that it actually works at scale, that it actually reduces disease incidence, that it brings costs down, it increases health. Because a lot of those quotes you're talking about, Rob, are like at a population level, if you got people to lose weight, which is very different from like if you put hormone therapy on everyone, and much, much more different than if you did red light therapy with everyone. Like, so a lot of this stuff is proven enough that like no one said it's unsafe, and maybe slightly better for someone who wants it, but is really hard to justify in an actuarial table makes any sense. And so we just got to do the good work to show that it works, and then wait for the system to sort of mature itself into it, is my
Okay. So build the evidence, market, and make it seamless.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I'm sorry to be pessimistic about the state of healthcare
No, I
today,
mean
but I
it's
think
early
that,
days.
but the good news is there's plenty of runway for most of these technologies in the segments that are interested. You know, there's enough cash pay business if that's what you do, and there's a very, very small segment I think that's going to fit in traditional healthcare in the short run.
Yeah, in that survey, was there one area that people care more about, or did you examine that?
We did a couple of ways. So the main thing we asked was like, what are they motivating for? So behind this, and I'm happy to share it, but I feel like I'm maybe talking too much. We put, for those who do product development, a jobs to be done framework against this. Like, what is the consumer buying these products for? And it's very much the kind of framework Hill you're talking about. Is it to look better? Is it to feel better? Is it to prevent things? That I think is different from what you're saying, Rob. Is like, is it cardiovascular health? Is it weight? Weight is clearly the big thing.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, it always
That's
is.
always been a big overlap between health and well-being.
Link to
Outside
health.
of that,
Yeah.
when you look across a population, say, is it sleep? Is it cardiovascular? Is it mental health? It roughly breaks down evenly across it, which is why it's hard to do at a population level, because at a population level, the needs are varied. It's not like there's one thing that pops for you.
Got it. Hillary, sorry, I
Oh no, I
I want to.
love this because my thoughts weave a lot of what Erica and Adam have both been saying together. And I fully think that this is a very multi-layered and dimensional question that you've asked, which is why we're having so many different opinions about it. So I think the first point is, what do you consider like longevity versus generalized healthcare? I'm of the mind that it becomes one and the same. You chase it long enough, it becomes one and the same. So we call it longevity today. It's becoming what we consider consumer healthcare, direct to consumer healthcare very quickly. It's exactly the same if you look at the types of marketing branding out there. And it will one day take over wellness, like primary care, and eventually all outpatient care, is my belief. And I've also recently come to the conclusion that we have a faulty assumption that insurance should cover wellness-based care, primary care. And I know that's a very controversial thought, and I didn't originally believe this, but it was my colleagues in the field who kind of convinced me that it just doesn't make sense. And no other sort of insurance system, like think of your car, you don't get, car maintenance covered by insurance. Insurance is there for your accidents and so forth. It simply just makes sense that healthcare insurance should be there actually as what it is, kind of the sick care insurance. So imposing that model on a wellness first, health span first model just will never make sense. And
Hmm.
as a result, we simply have to change our mindset around that. And we are going in this direction. There's a reason why consumer healthcare is exponentially growing right now, is because people are starting to take charge of their own health. They're really taking agency and authority over their own healthcare. And that's what we're seeing with people paying out of pocket to get diagnostics done, to get their hormones, everything else, and why companies such as Hims and Hers and Roe have grown so exponentially in the past few years. So that is still today a smaller minority of healthcare spend, obviously, but it's growing and people love it. And if you look at it from a business perspective, it is a bottomless wallet sort of spend. And I'll explain why. If you look at what has traditionally been considered pure wellness, so now we're talking like, skincare, wellness, massages, even. Well, let's go that far. People spend for that without budget nearly. They will just spend. And then we're starting to see folks think of preventative care that way. And I think that's wonderful. Like, if we spend more time, money, and budget towards prevention and we think of it as wellness care, then we will always want to spend more. And it's not really limited by a budget the same way utilities are limited by a certain budget. So, to loop it all back, we talked about scalability. I think really we need to look at what's working for consumer focused brands and lean into it. Erica spoke on this. And I built CareCore from this very belief, which is that there are things you can do that are absolutely scalable. We're built on a telemedicine platform, very AI first and, consumer first, accessibility first. And where does the practitioner fit in here is in the brand. Why would someone go to you as a practitioner, a clinician, a doctor, versus going to something like Roe or Hims and Hers? It's because they crave that relationship, or perhaps they just love your brand because you have their favorite podcast or Instagram channel. And so I think that will be the future of physician or clinician first healthcare, while we use technology to really scale up the transactional piece of healthcare.
Yeah, fantastic. Sorry, I got to remind everybody who's participating in our audience if you had some questions for the audience, please post them on the chat, and we'll be sure to pass them on. And in fact, I did note that we did get a comment more than a question. This comes from George Smith. He likes the concept of the feedback, sees as king, and often find in his own mission that explain the concepts to patients, he himself is a physician, so that they get it and why it's beneficial to make positive adjustments. So we get some alignment from George. Terry Allen's asking, right now our target audience is probably people with higher education, higher income, maybe government care health plans. I don't know about that one, but we can discuss that. How long before this will be able to move down the majority of the population? That kind of builds off of what we're talking about on the scalability. I don't know if you guys have any more comments on how you might address how do you get this into care plans?
Yeah,
So,
well, yeah, go ahead, Erica.
yeah, well, I was just going to say, sorry, Hillary.
Mhm.
If they're looking to get into that high net worth group, it's really collaborating with like those that provide like life insurance to high net worth individuals, getting involved with family offices,
Mhm.
um, such as, like there's so many of them. But if you can focus on collaborating with family offices, attorneys, just business professionals that work with high net individuals, that's where you really get that, especially if someone needs like a key person policy, and they have to get their diagnostics done. That's a great client for someone who wants a high net worth um, patient because they need to be in optimal health. They're
Sure.
being insured to be in optimal health. So if you haven't thought about collaborating with those kind of individuals, that would be a great way to integrate that
Yeah. And
into
then that kind of goes
networking.
back to what Adam was saying, start with that smaller population, prove it out, and then it starts to trickle down into maybe the larger care plans. Is that my paraphrasing too much, Adam? Is
No,
that
I think that's right. I mean, I think interestingly, there's a huge tailwind, and those of you on who are concierge physicians from the more classical concierge setting is unfortunately the just shortage of clinicians in general and the rise of concierge medicine, which historically has had nothing to do with longevity, right? It is entirely an access play where the
Mhm.
physician gives you more time, more availability, and then has bridged a little bit into what I would call like a system navigation play. And the vast majority of people in concierge medicine today are older who need more interaction with their physician and navigation to the specialist. Like that is the concierge practice. But as clinical panels get bigger and bigger and the care people are getting and they can't even find a doctor independent of anything longevity, more and more people have to look to concierge care. And so there is less lower income folks, still affluent, who are looking for concierge care. Prices are coming down. You're seeing models. Amazon obviously bought One Medical, which is sort of the low end of concierge care, to do that. So I think the failure of traditional medicine to satisfy clinicians because we just have so few of them, and to deliver anything resembling decent care in a lot of settings, and this is not the individual clinicians, the system is a tailwind for longevity, because once you have that relationship, to Erica's point, those clients are also the ones who are getting the labs and starting to do it. And this is why we see traditional concierge practices moving into longevity, because they're being pulled there by their patients. That is not the bulk of the population. That's moving down a curve of affluence. And so that will happen. I think to get to the big population, we need to bring prices down, which will happen naturally. And some of that is the technology. And we need to demonstrate that this stuff works at a population level, that it's not a selection bias with engagement, and that it drives outcomes that unfortunately are measurable and important in 12 to 36-ish months, maybe 60 months, depending on how the payer, whether that's the employer or the government, thinks about their timeframes.
Right.
And we'll get there. It just takes some time.
Okay. We think about things that would have incredible adoption rates, and one of them obviously is the artificial intelligence, and we think about how OpenAI just went on its adoption curve like nothing we've ever seen. Are we seeing the same thing in clinical practice? Are doctors adopting it as fast? Is that part of the challenge we have? Is that, there's generally doctors can be fairly slow adopters. I mean, you read in the news and the reports that they don't have a great deal of trust, and that's understandable. I mean, some of these AI tools aren't really clinical ready, but are you guys seeing that maybe this could be that push, or something that could help us with the increasing the speed of adoption into the Healthspan space? Hillary, do you want to start
Yeah.
on that?
I love this topic because I chat with all of our clinician friends about what's going on. And the reality is, you're right. Clinicians typically are a little bit slower to adopt new technologies because they're busy, is the reality. And you're stuck in this system that uses really outdated tech. They are told that they're not allowed to use technologies like AI a lot of the time. So you see it in residents, actually, and medical students more than in fully trained doctors, because they're kind of going around the side using AI the best they can. So there's slower adoption. There's also a fundamental difference in understanding of how technology works. I mean, the vast majority of the mainstream population doesn't really understand AI. I feel only privileged because my partner happens to be an AI scientist. So I understand very clearly why things happen the way they do, why we'll never have a 0% hallucination rate, those sorts of details. And you understand how to adjust your expectations around that. But that's not the case for the vast majority of humans, not even saying doctors. What I will say is, practically speaking, AI has just kind of buried doctors in its adoption by healthcare systems. And what I mean by that is, it has increased the throughput of visits, but it doesn't lessen the overall workload for a traditional physician working in the system. Because if you're spending less time on documentation, you just get more visits funneled in. And so you're not actually seeing any betterment of their lifestyle or workplace existence right now. In a concierge office, I think what it can do is it can increase the value and impact of things that you create. You could probably create really wonderful reports and educational material for your patients very easily now. And we're practically at the point, I saw someone make one and I was a little dubious about the quality of it, but you can create your own lab interpretation app in about a minute right now with the latest LLM coding. And things are moving fast a lot, but I don't actually think that it's going to change the trajectory of what's happening to clinicians, unfortunately. So,
Yeah.
mhm.
Yeah, that's a really interesting insight. Thank you for that. Erica, how do you see the AI adoption affecting some of the overall improvements in our health span delivery or concierge care?
Sure. I mean, I think the whole basis behind AI is to really use it as a tool, right? Not to replace something, but use it as a tool in your tool belt. So, as Hillary is saying, so you can have more time with your patient, being able to utilize a really good AI software that specializes in labs to really get that clinical summary that the doctor can then just verify and read before presenting it to the patient. saves the physician so much time, although they will, like she said, the workload will still be the same, but you have then more time to spend with your patients if you're able to get the AI, whether it's reading the radiology, right? Because there's a shortage of radiologists right now. So they're utilizing AI. And from what I've heard and read, the AI is like 80% accurate, which is pretty good for a radiologist report. So being able to utilize it for tools to help the physician to give the patient a better experience is, I think, the way to utilize AI. Or if it takes, again, it takes all the data from the wearables and puts it into an actionable plan that the physician can then, again, verify and read before the patient sees it, I think is a great way to utilize AI. So it's for wearables, labs, creating nutrition plans based on the labs, creating a supplement plan based on the labs, reading the genetic, because genetic reports are very tricky to read. So getting an AI interpretation on that also saves the physician so much time, which then empowers the patient once they get the information and they don't have to wait weeks. It might
Yeah.
be like hours, days.
Yeah, yeah, I mean we use AI tools a lot in at Molecular U and they have to be supervised still because we do get a lot of false information. Even the summaries generating from our own data, it took a long while to get the guardrails just right so that the summaries are always accurate. So we're pretty excited about that so that it can be that really convenient tool for practitioners. Adam, I'm going to give you the last word on the AI
I'll just
before.
speak quick on it. I think adoption is really high, both on the admin, the clinical side. But I think, Rob, your example of where you are with Molecular U is a good example of we're still relatively early in being able to trust it to do work that will then scale. So
Yeah.
like, a lot of this, I think it's the next 12, 24, 36 months where we'll start seeing its impact as we have ones we trust and we can roll out.
Yeah. And I've heard the people that are going to do best using AI are the experts because they can see when things aren't correct. And so it saved them a lot of time because they don't have to do it all themselves and they can look and say, okay, well, that doesn't make sense. Let's double check it. So it may be that it is an ideal tool for practitioners because they already have that trained expertise. So hopefully we'll see that accelerate a bit. I want to thank you, everybody. I think we might have, do we have one more question from the audience? Oh, we do. Okay. One on medical tourism. I don't know. Are you guys at all involved in medical tourism? Do you feel this is a way to engage with, oh, you are, Erica? A way to kind of grow the industry a little bit?
I wouldn't use the term medical tourism because it's a little bit illegal. But um,
It's funny.
there's a
I
lot
visited.
of, like one of the doctors I work with was just in Greece, presenting at a wellness resort that does a lot of the diagnostics that, because different countries have different rules and regulations and laws. So, I think being able to go to countries like Austria or Greece or Mexico, because certain stem cell, natural killer cell treatments are illegal in the United States, but
Mhm.
that's where the Tom Brady's and the Dana Whites are going, is to places like Mexico to get these treatments to optimize their health. And people should know about them and where they can go. So I wouldn't necessarily call it medical tourism. It's just, getting care in a different country, but then having that follow up care in the United States that has the collaboration with that clinic on the continuing care of, if they've just gone to Mexico to get like a dendritic cell treatment for cancer, right? Then having the relationship with the oncologist in the United States to follow up and manage the patient, the ongoing care.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think the question is more like, should the clinicians act as destinations for their care, concierge care, so as medical
I
tourism.
don't know. I don't know if I would use the term
You
medical
wouldn't use that term.
tourism. Yeah, I would use it
Connotations.
more as, say like having those collaborations with those clinics in other countries
Oh,
is
okay.
really valuable. And I know actually doctors in the United States actually go to places like Antigua or Costa Rica and have subclinics
Hmm.
there because they can treat the patients in ways that they can't in the United States. So just being really creative with it, whether it's a collaboration with another country's clinic or opening up your own shop in a clinic or like renting an office in one of those clinics in another country. I mean, it's a great concept because there is really great technology out there that you
Right.
cannot do in the United States. So I think it's very valuable.
Okay.
Mhm.
Adam, Hillary, any comments?
Oh, I just want to double click on that. I absolutely think that the world is your oyster in terms of healthcare. It's not, you have to think about the reasons why you're not doing something in the US. Is it if it's because of a reasonable reason, let's just say, like something has not yet been approved or introduced to our regulatory system, but it's available somewhere else, that's a good reason. If it's a bad, quote unquote, I'm going to say bad with big quotes, such as you're just trying to cut costs, but maybe the quality might be lower and you're skimping on like major quality checks, I would say, that's a big red flag. But the whole world should be open in terms of healthcare for a person. And yeah, I think of it that way all the time.
Yeah, yeah, that's a healthier look. Adam, any comments? Or are you gonna? No.
I guess the one thing I'd add is this is one of the few categories, as Hillary has said directly, and I think Erica's echoing, that is consumer driven. And
Mm,
so the more competition we have, the faster we learn what works. And I think, for a sector of the population, a sector of the services, that includes international competition. And so we should all either do that if it's right or learn from it in terms of what we bring back here. Because the rest of healthcare doesn't respond to market pressures in the way other industries do.
yeah, no, that's a really great look. I would really like to thank you all for joining us today. It's been amazing, particularly our panelists, Hillary and Erica and Adam. Great insight. I hope you found it as an insightful conversation as I have. If you hope to carry on the conversation with any of us, some of us will be at the Health Table Longevity clinics coming up next week or even on Monday, and then on the A4M, come visit us there. It is I find these conferences actually pretty exciting and the enthusiasm of all the attendees. So if you're interested in the concierge space, these are some of the conferences to attend. We'll see you there, I hope. And thank you again. And please join us for our next episode. And again, please join me in thanking our panelists for joining us today. Thank you all.